We are jumping right into building something which ended up being for a different animal than first planned. I was planning on building for the red foxes today, but then this structure kind of happened and it reminded me of an idea I had for raccoons some time ago. So I did end up moving this part which I'm making here, but you'll see that in a moment, and then we'll continue the build in another location near the entrance on the left side of the pronghorn panorama. I did have a bit of space saved here for a smaller enclosure anyway, which was quite fitting for something like raccoons. We will most likely still build for the foxes another day, so don't forget to subscribe to not miss out on that. What we are building here is an aviary-like structure. It ends up looking like something you could keep a bird in, but sadly this game seems to suffer from ornithophobia, and we don't even have a single bird species from North America, which is kinda absurd. So instead we're going to keep raccoons in here, which also is a decent match for this type of enclosure. But I guess we could see it as something that used to house birds in the past. I could imagine an owl or a hawk of some kind sitting in here in the zoo's early days. Then later it stood empty and was renovated into something for raccoons. Usually when I've been working with the mesh pieces, I've used it for more square shapes, so making this more rounded structure was a good practice. And it also was nice to get a more organic looking building into this part of the park. Just like the skunks, which we added in the last video from here, raccoons might not be your typical desert species. But raccoons aren't picky with where they live. If there is a source of permanent water in an area, then they can make a home out of it. Because of that, you can find raccoons in a place like the Sonoran Desert, and therefore they also fit into the drylands. I wasn't quite sure on how to deal with closing the structure on the side which is not placed against the building. Doing it with mesh pieces would be tricky, and I'm not even sure it would look that good. I tried some different things, and most of this I decided to cut out of the video. I was close to getting something to work with some of the wood pieces from the Twilight pack, since you can find some with rounder shapes, but it would not really fit with the size of the beams. I ended up tilting the whole structure, which gave it a more interesting appearance, and then I decided to go with the big ibex cliff enrichment item. And I thought that worked out quite nice, and it was somewhat of an easy solution. The screen recording messed up a few times along the way, which I didn't always notice in time, so some parts of the progress I don't have recorded. This means there'll be some jumps in the video. Luckily most of this was stuff that didn't end up playing an important part for the build anyway, so you might not notice it too much. But now you know in case some cut seems odd. A new DLC and update is most likely just around the corner, and how much the new DLC content will end up having an impact on this park we can also only speculate about. There's been a few packs along the way which haven't done anything for this project. I started this in the time before the Southeast Asian Animal pack, and that pack really didn't have any value for this concept at all. My biggest wish, and what I think this game would benefit from the most, is a bird pack, or at least a partly bird pack of some kind. And even if that is the case, I can't really be sure anything in it would fit this concept. But I do really hope for at least one bird fitting into my Oasis aviary would show up at some point. That structure is mostly built for birds, so it would be really nice to get some of those in there. If the upcoming pack is interesting but got nothing to add to this park, then I might consider some kind of a side project. But as long as it features at least one or two useful species for the DRYLANDS, then I'm probably just going to continue as planned and make use of those as well. But I guess we'll know soon enough. But in the meantime, I think I'll try to get some other type of Planet Zoo content out. At first I was a bit skeptical about adding raccoons to this zoo, both because they don't tend to be associated much with desert areas, but as I already told you, there is a connection there, but mostly because I saw several American people on various places on the internet claiming that raccoons are not zoo animals. Comments saying something like, "I can see those in my back garden, why would it be in a zoo?" And I know you shouldn't trust random strangers on the internet, but it still got me thinking if there was anything to it. So I did some research to be sure, and while they for sure are far from in every zoo in America, they're not really uncommon to find there. It is like it is with other native least concerned animals like the skunk. You can find them in some places, but they'll often be rescued animals or something like that. And over time I also did start to see more comments from Americans who have seen raccoons in zoos. So it seemed like I was good to go. And if you are American, then I would like to hear if you've ever been to a zoo with raccoons. In Europe, raccoons are very common in captivity. Countries which are members of the European Union are no longer allowed to breed with them, since they have become a pretty big problem as invasive species. But they probably aren't going to disappear from our zoos anytime soon, since some of those invasive individuals ends up in zoos if they get caught. I could be wrong, but it seems like the hitboxes for smaller creatures in Planet Zoo have become better in the newer DLCs. I feel like it has been easier to make the enclosures work as intended for the skunks and raccoons than it was for the meerkats and prairie dogs. And to just summarize this habitat, we got a few climbing structures, we got the small shelter area under the roof, we have an implied nesting basket up on the big log, and after I otherwise was close to having this video ready, I realized it probably would be the best to give the raccoons some kind of water feature to better deal with the desert sun. And since this enclosure is quite small, making an actual usable water area with the terrain would mess up the whole build. So I went with a small implied pool using one of the scenery items that holds a bit of water. This means they can't use it, but I think it looks believable. And I've been thinking about maybe turning this trick into some kind of a tutorial. Let me know if that would be of interest. And otherwise I think we are ready for some cinematic shots now. Don't forget to leave the video a like and subscribe to the channel.